Cody Alexander match quarters. Today we're going to be watching a soft press technique by Georgia's Kamari Lassiter. Now, one thing that we have to understand in soft press is that we may not necessarily always be able to get our hands on the receiver. So when we get a fade route, how are we going to transition, slow the receiver down, and get into phase? One thing that I always preach is to swipe the wrist, hook the elbow, and then we want to lean on the receiver into the sideline. Kamari Lassiter does an excellent example of this when he played against Kentucky. And we're going to take a look at this and walk through the technique from the start of the play to the finish. First, let's talk about his alignment. I really like this. Now, we have the receiver who is pretty much on the top of the numbers. He's going to be even or head up. I think even if they are on the numbers playing head up, yes, you're giving the receiver a two-way go in a sense, but really what you're doing is you're protecting yourself and you're staying inside, but you're not too far inside that you can't cut him off. So right here, we're going to get head up alignment. I love his hands. His hands are right on his knees. There's a tendency for DBs to get those hands and get those arms completely straight. The problem with dropping them straight is the very first thing you do is you're going to have to holster those arms. And what that tends to do is when you shoot those arms back, because you have to get them up anyway, is that it actually brings your chest up. Now, the other thing is he has a flat back and we have a nice little bend right here. Notice how his knees are almost knock-kneed, meaning that they're kind of going in. I actually like that for DBs. I think it helps them not get too wide. Too often, if we tell them to get into a power stance and those knees are kind of shoulder width apart, the first thing you do is you take a step out and then you take another step out. The next thing you know, the distance of your feet are too wide. So we have our knees are going to be really tight and our feet are squarely underneath. I actually like a narrow stance. And the reason why I like a narrow stance is because, again, it goes back to what we said. My first step is going to then get me to shoulder width apart, meaning I'm going to actually get into my power stance off of my first step or my proactive step. And I think that there's a tendency with DBs to take, when you're shoulder width apart, you take a step, but then you don't bring your other foot. And now we get wider, wider, wider. Next thing you know, we're propped and the receiver's running by us. So let's look at his technique from the get. We're going to get a proactive step inside. Now, what ends up happening is we are going to bring that foot up. I think that we kind of overcoach the false step. It's one thing to be in an off stance and to be in kind of a heel toe alignment and bring that back foot up. When you're in an even stance, all he's doing is resetting his body. Notice how he's not really taking much of a stance, but he's working his way back. And it's really hard because, again, we're not in a receiver stance in a sense where we have something to press us off. We're in an even stance. We have no idea where he's going to go. So loading one foot or the other probably isn't a great thing to do. If anything, he's got weight on that outside foot and he brings that inside foot out. So you do have a little bit of a proactive step inside, and then you have the other step there. Now we get a little bit of a step, and then we get a shuffle by this receiver, and then he gets into his route. This is not a very good release by the receiver because he doesn't really press you inside. He doesn't really move him. He's just kind of getting a hard step and then shuffle, making it maybe seem like he's going to run a slant, but instead he keeps his shoulder square and he goes vertical. Now let's watch the technique of the corner. So we get our inside step, and then what we're going to do is get a kick step. And I really like a kick step at the top of this. Notice how his hips are working at a 45. So our steps are actually at a 45, but our shoulders are going to stay square through here. Notice how he's staying connected to the inside shoulder as well. So even though we started head up, we're going to always proactively step with our inside foot when we're playing more of a man technique. Then we're going to get our kick step at a 45-degree angle to stay on top. Now, what I really like here is once he transitions, now we know right now that this is going to be a fade route. You have the receiver crossover. He's essentially aiming. His head is down. Everything is telling me that this is a fade route. Notice how his eyes are down. He's in a crouched position. He's at a 45. He does not cross over until the receiver crosses over. His eyes are still down on the hit. Now watch his hand here go and slice that hand. So notice, so again, we can't get a punch on the pec. So we can't reset ourselves and stay in front. Instead, I'm going to swipe the arm of the receiver and watch how it opens the chest. Okay. So all that allows me to do is I'm going to open him up. I'm going to reestablish that I'm in control. And then you can't really see it because of the angle, but he's getting his elbow into the shoulder pocket of the receiver, and he's going to press that receiver out. Once he's in phase, he now can look back for the ball. Notice how the receiver doesn't have any room. He's past the red line. We've earned the red line. We've moved him off. I'm in phase, and I can look back for the ball. And then the ball is underthrown on a back shoulder fade, and it ends up going right to him. Nice job by the receiver getting his hands through. But this is a great example of kind of that soft press technique from the beginning. So again, we're going to get our little proactive step. We're going to get a little shuffle, kick step, eyes are down. Once we see the transition, we open up, we swipe the wrist, we hook right in that shoulder pocket, and then we want to press to the sideline, only looking back when we know we're in control and the receiver's looking back at all. Go get the ball and run the route for the receiver. This is a great example of soft press against a fade by Georgia's Kamari Lassiter. One more time, swipe, hook, lean, look.